This might be interesting. LazyPeon making a video about the glory days of the MMOs, huh? When will they return? Starting out with some EverQuest footage here on the screen. Let's see what this is about.
Glory days of MMORPGs. Back when you were dropped in what felt like a completely unexplored world with infinite possibilities.
Yeah.
You spawned into the game for the first time.
He's playing some EQ2 is interesting. I don't know if I've ever heard Peon really talk about EQ and EQ2 before. All right, let's see where this goes.
And there was instantly a feeling of mystery.
RuneScape.
You'd quest for a bit, see some high levels hanging out near the starting area, wearing their epic gear, and it
Yeah, dude, that's still my experience when I played P99, dude. Just like right there in that little like tunnel opening from Achenon, there's like a high level mage decked out in all of this cool shit.
Inspire you to keep playing to eventually obtain that same badass gear. Cosmetics from a cash shop and transmog wasn't a thing back then, remember? Yep. Even the forefathers of MMOs like Ultima Online or EverQuest still see a lot of people going back to the
there we go. Hey, Project 1999 green server, baby!
Servers just to experience that classic style of MMO design, where your choices were impactful, progression felt meaningful, and social interaction was more abundant. Starting from Ultima Online, EverQuest, RuneScape to WoW, and so many more that I can't list, created a highly competitive and, most importantly, incredibly motivated market. People loved MMOs, and developers wanted to be a part of this new virtual world phenomenon. Just from 2004 to 2005, 31 new MMORPGs were released.
Oh, yeah. There are actually shitloads of MMOs. And you know, some of the MMOs, that really is true for a lot of people, though, that like that first MMO thing, right? Where it kind of doesn't matter which one it was, that it's going to be really special to you. I see posts, I feel like daily on r/MMORPG with people like asking like, help me remember the name of this MMO I played back in the day, or they do remember and they post about it. And a lot of times they're like this random ass MMO I've never heard of, but for them it was their EverQuest.
Ranging from Dofus and Metin 2 to World of Warcraft and Guild Wars 1. In 2021,
yeah, Guild Wars 1 was pretty fun too. I played that one quite a bit. You know, it doesn't fit the typical MMO thing, but it was different enough.
Saw Elion and New World release. Elion died pretty much instantly, and New World has had its fair share of struggles, to say the least.
Yep, but it seems like it's coming back.
We've only really had
New World, you know, like there's been queues for all the servers and shit, and they're about to like open new servers and such again, man. Like, you know, they maybe do it. Like, what if they end up being Final Fantasy 14, like Part 2? You know, like people talk about how that game came out and it was like in such a bad state, right? That they did a whole event and fucking like killed the entire world and then rebirthed it, right? And that's a Realm Reborn, and then now it's good. You know, it's not for me, but undoubtedly it's good to a lot of people and they love it. What if New World ends up being like, right, like the second one? You know, because like they really, right, they keep working, they're doing all that stuff. We just saw the shit is looking good. It'd be crazy if it ended up being like, you know, if it gets up there into like the top, you know, top 5.
Lost Ark. Throne and Liberty by NCSoft was supposed to release at the end of the year, but is delayed till 2023. So as an MMO...
Oh, delayed, huh? Interesting. And again, that's one where I feel like I haven't seen enough.
Are we, the players, the problem? Is corporate greed just taking over? Or are younger gamers with their shorter attention spans just not into MMO's long-winded progression?
Literally all of the above. It's not an or situation, in my opinion, right? It's literally every single thing you just listed as part of it, right? Can you imagine? Like, I'm sure kids that are super addicted to TikTok are probably not loving the delayed gratification, long progression system of MMOs, right? They love BRs. Things where you just jump in instant, right? Instant. Defiance and Defiance 2050 game closure announcement. Interesting. Okay, so he's just showing a bunch of them close. Yeah, Vanguard was, I didn't actually personally play that one. It like flew under the radar and I don't remember hearing much about it. It could have been during like, I went through periods of my life though, right? Where I was like homeless, or I was living on farms and shit and I wasn't involved in gaming stuff at all for a while. So it could have also been during that period. But I know it was like by the Brad McQuaid and them, you know, who did the original EverQuest. I never really got to try it.
Are people just fundamentally bored of the MMO formula?
No.
Why do so many games feel empty?
Nope. If that was true, Lost Ark wouldn't have had like 1.3 million people concurrent playing it at launch, right? People definitely want a good MMO.
Repetitive. What's happened to us, and how has game design changed in the last 20 years? Well, for one, we have changed.
That's
like
true.
A pack of rabid dogs, we're jumping on every nugget of information whenever a new MMO is announced.
True.
Early access, oversharing development up.
Part of that though is just because, right, content creators out here fucking thirsty for shit.
Updates and open betas get us excited.
That's more about people getting internet access. A lot of people still didn't have a decent internet until the 2010s. Yeah, that's true. And also the computers, man. Like, the computers necessary to run like EverQuest and EverQuest 2 for back in the day, like it was pretty like not the norm, you know? Like most people didn't have that.
For the adventures to come, but also allow us to explore the world, theory craft builds, and map out leveling routes. The moment info is leaked or discovered, it's shared in the form of YouTube videos, Twitch live streams, tons of
views,
different guide websites, and word of mouth. This will not go away, and yes, I understand that I'm part of the problem here. Nowadays, there's much more of a financial...
you know, buddy, you know we need the views, buddy.
MMO developers need to find a way to make their games with enough complexity that simply watching guides won't necessarily make you succeed. Compared to older games, modern MMOs typically have a much more casualized open world and overall experience.
I was gonna say, like in EverQuest, you could know like what you needed to do to get the item, right? But it still didn't make it streamlined, fast, or easy, and you still needed other people to do it. You know, like this is one of the downsides of things becoming more easy. Is like all you need is to like know exactly where to go, basically, right? Or like what to do. But if the challenge is very difficult, then you know, like even if you find it out, it might take a while still and be challenging to be able to accomplish it, especially if it requires other people and such also.
The point where going out and exploring doesn't feel dangerous. Unless you're inside a raid or doing some instanced challenge mode content, monsters in the world are usually trivial. Contrast this to EverQuest back in the day, where random mobs roaming the world would often require multiple players to take down. Developer time is often wasted by...
Right, and then they mix them all in and shit too, right? You like mix in some high level random ass griffin in the low level area, so you always have to be paying attention to that. Right, so because if you're not and it path is by, it's gonna, you know, it's gonna fucking one shot you, which sometimes then makes for other interesting, you know, interactions with players. Because then maybe you're shouting out in the out of character or whatever in the zone chat and seeing if there's any high level in the area that could come kill it for you, so that you have maybe like 30 minutes or an hour of peace without this thing trying to stalk you and murder you. You know.
Focusing on brainless target dummies across the world in which killing them makes you feel absolutely nothing. If I attack a humanoid in WoW Classic, it will run away at low health, which not only makes sense realistically, but also makes you think about executing targets, or just simply not pulling monsters inside huge camps. Most games don't even think about simple interactions like that anymore, in the pursuit of access.
I mean, I don't know if you actually played a lot of EQ or whatever, right? But EverQuest, like, they did that also.
Accessibility, MMOs have kinda lost their sense of accomplishment, during the leveling anyway. Also, is it me, or did older MMOs just feel bigger? Larger worlds, longer time to get to max level, more races, professions, dungeons, mob types, and quest lines?
Part of that's just because of travel systems, right? Older MMOs had like no special EverQuest, again, being one of the best examples in the original classic, and still if you go P99, right? Like, you want to get across the world, you're going to have to find like a druid or a wizard friend to teleport your ass. Or else, I mean, you can go find the city with the proper dock that'll take you to the, you know, place you're looking for, and then you can sit there and wait for the boat, and then you can actually ride the boat all the fucking way there, you know?
Have developers put less effort into making their MMOs ambitious due to so many failing over the years, and it being considered more risky to make an MMO compared to any other gaming genres from a financial perspective?
Yeah,
games
for sure
are made
that's
as
part
a
of
product nowadays more so than ever. Data analysis are at the forefront, with market and consumer behavior studied to maximize player engagement and profit. Most MMOs from 1999 to 2012 used a subscription fee business model with no cash shop.
Yep.
This incentivized developers to make the game as good as possible, constantly pumping out updates to keep people handing over money every month because they enjoy the game.
I do think this is a pretty significant part of why they tend to be not as good also. This is a really good point that he's bringing up here, right? With monetization shifting from a subscription model that you would only happily keep paying if the game was good and entertaining you and the content was there, yada, 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 to bullshit like cosmetic cash shops and the pay-to-win cash shops and just in general, all this cash shop shit is like, they don't have to do that anymore, right? Because like the small minority of people that cannot stop themselves from just spending all their money in that cash shop fund the game like enough and more than the like just the subscription fees would, you know? It's a huge bummer, but I do think this is pretty significant. It's one of the reasons why like cash shops can suck.
Once a player is sufficiently invested into a free-to-play MMO, you can start to introduce the little annoying systems or inconvenience them in some way. Boring dailies, lack of inventory space, have every in-game obtainable outfit look like arse.
That's definitely a big one that BDO does, is the making everything look like ass so that you buy the cosmetics. EVE Online doubled their subscription. Such a crazy idea, $30 a month sub. I can't believe it. Interesting. I'm actually not that surprised. Like, depending on what else they did, you know? We've talked about this before, right? But like, the MMO subscription fee has been $15 like since 1999. It's one of the only things that hasn't increased in cost, with everything else increasing in cost. And their costs to make things like, you know, and run the stuff is increasing with that also. So I do think it makes sense if it's not on top of a cash shop full of shit, right? A lot of people, like, there's been threads and polls and such, you know, done on Reddit about this. Like, would you be willing to pay a higher sub if the game had no fucking cash shop at all? Absolutely nothing. And a lot of people say yes.
Free-to-play MMOs have put developers against the players by making it financially beneficial to create problems to sell solutions. Whereas the old sub-fee MMOs, the developers are incentivized to give players the best game possible to keep them subscribed. For me, this is the biggest reason why MMOs from 1999 to 2012 just felt different. The business model just allowed these games to attempt to be the best versions of themselves. So with many examples of failures over the past few years, there's increased pressure from investors for a company to make back that money as quickly as possible, even if it damages the integrity of the game in the process.
You know, I will say also that way MMOs are so tribal and people get into them, like the WoW has always been the good example for a long time. I think that alone is one of the things that's hurt MMOs, right? Because there's been MMOs that have come and gone that were probably fairly decent, right? Like, he made the video recently looking at WildStar, and it's like, a lot of games, like, they just don't get a chance. MMOs really are like this massive, hard to do gamble genre of game, because most people, like, they're not willing to stop playing their one, right? Like, they're gonna play, dude, there are people that are gonna play WoW until they die. Until they die, or Activision finally turns the servers off, right? They're just going to keep playing that one, and they will always say it's the best forever, no matter what fucking comes out.
Fortunately, as gaming monetization has changed, the risk versus reward just isn't there for MMO investment nowadays like it used to be back when it was the hype genre. So is there any hope? Will we ever see MMOs become the hype bandwagon genre again? Is the fantasy of what's portrayed in Sword Art Online, Ready Player One, or over?
Right, most likely not, to be honest. But again, I think things like Lost Ark coming out and over like 1.3 million people concurrent, like playing the fucking game in the first week, I think that's a strong sign that it's possible if something good enough comes out. But I think, like, right as the things have gone and advanced, there's also been more kind of like fracturing of stuff, right? Like, there's lots of different styles of MMOs, and a lot of people want different stuff. And I don't know if they're ever going to get one that's that big again, like WoW was in its like peak. I just think you're going to have games that are a little bit more specific to what each people like are liking, right? And just like, you know, EverQuest and such, when it was popping off and it was like there were very few options. Same thing with WoW when it was popping off. There wasn't like a shitload of competition and options, right? It was just kind of the most advanced one at its time. But now we're at a point where, like, you can make all these like different advanced MMOs, but what style do you want, right? Do you want like a survival style MMO? Do you want a totally like cooperative PvE like style MMO? Do you want a Dark Age of Camelot style MMO? Like which style MMO? Do you want a sci-fi MMO? And I think that's going to make it hard for you to ever have one that's as big as WoW was in its peak, right? Because basically everyone just had like WoW as the main option. Whereas right now, like through time, we use so many options that I don't think it's that likely, you know?
Overlord a real possibility in the future? Or would those games actually be ruined by pay to win in reality?
That's also true.
As for the short term,
right? That's also true. That's also a big part of why it's probably never going to happen again, right? Because like every new MMO that comes out ends up with its monetization ruining the fucking game. This is why, again, we were saying like maybe we will go check out New World again because it's the only one on the market with zero pay to win bullshit.
As much as New World hasn't lived up to the hype, at the very least, it's improving, adding new content, and still isn't pay to win.
Yeah, there we go, right? And still isn't pay to win. I think the option should be inside the MMO. Dark Age of Camelot had so many playstyles. Yeah, but like right to a degree, you're not gonna be able to satisfy everyone in any one. And we've talked about this before. Like I personally think trying to do that is how you make a really boring, bland, shitty fucking game, right? And like for example, right, it's like there's no way for one MMO to satisfy high fantasy and sci-fi at the fucking same time, right? Because the very existence of sci-fi or right all the steampunky shit and guns and cars and such in my high fantasy MMO, it's a complete aesthetic turnoff for the entire game for me that it's in my high fantasy MMO, right? I want the fucking fantasy. I don't want the guns and shit. You know, it is actually one of the knocks against New World for me is I don't like that it's guns and shit and there's not more high fantasy elements. You can't be like an interesting, cool, different race. You can only be a little fucking human and you can't even be that fucking jacked of a human either, right? Like, can I at least make my human so goddamn jacked he looks like a fucking ogre, please?
And you've also got the possibility of successful entrepreneurs who are passionate about the genre making their own MMOs, as we've seen with Ashes of Creation. Maybe one of those games will absolutely...
Ashes is still the one that I have hope for.
I want to see the next big MMO bring back that sense of awe you had when you saw a player on the server with some crazy legendary item that nobody else has. A game...
The problem is that's never going to happen again, even with cosmetics. So like even Ashes of Creation on the horizon, they've already said what their monetization is, right? They're going for the subscription, no box cost shit, you know, just the subscription fee, but then also the cosmetic shop. Cosmetic shops directly stop this thing that he's talking about from happening. And I know he's against cosmetics also, right? And this is basically the reason why, right? There is no more of that. You don't ever get to see a high-level character again and look at them and immediately get all those feelings of like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. He's achieved this and he has like this fucking item and you know the exact name of the item and it, you know, it inspires you and drives you to like want to try to get your little necromancer to look just like that necromancer when you collect all the, you know, the awesome items, right? It doesn't happen anymore because everyone's just transmogged up, you know? It totally ruins that. And also for PvP, there's other like implications, right? You're not anymore able to like visually assess the threat you're going into because you can't tell what armor and weapons your opponent has.
Or is it old school design philosophy that will prevail in the end? When will the glory days of MMOs return? Only time will tell.
I definitely think the older style design was much better, right? And what you need is like that with some like new innovations for things to kind of like keep things interesting, better combat and graphics, etc. Right? Like I would totally play an EverQuest that was just basically like EverQuest with way better graphics and like an updated combat system, you know? But it would still probably be pretty limited. And you'd have to deal with some stuff, right? Like there's certain things that even like the devs themselves felt like were maybe too bad. They probably wouldn't do the thing again where like you had the rare spawn. And then the rare spawn also had like a really rare loot table thing also. So it was like this double insane RNG on top of RNG that they thought was like even themselves they thought was too much. And then like your downtime, I know like they even the EverQuest guys like the way they would have, you know, sped up the downtime a bit. Apparently they had internal conflict about this. And Brad wanted the downtime to be like as long as it was, because he said that's like when the social time was. But I don't know if that's so much true now, right? Where most people, like, they don't type in the game anymore. But I wonder if that's because of how the games are. And would people get back to chatting in the game, in the party, about stuff more if there was a little bit more downtime and it was a little bit slower paced in between the polls, versus, you know, like everything basically having to be on voice comms in order to communicate at the pace that's necessary, right? For everything.